Hello and welcome. What day is it? It is Tuesday. It used to be Tech Tuesday, and I suppose it still is. My name's Mark Abadi. This is live, inspirational, common unity collaboration. Hashtag LICC. That's the way. Today we have a fantastic guest, very inspirational speaker and inspirational being who has gone through many journeys. Mark Sims is going to be joining us. So let me tell you, we're going to be talking about the Harmonic Conversion 2020 and going beyond world peace, what that means. Mark is a spiritual scientist, a Harvard Business School alumni. His background's in computer aided design, CAD, and internet security and nanotechnology. He saw the gap in the market and made self-made money. In 2012, Mark came across the Disclosure Project and participated in a week-long retreat training with Dr. Stephen Greer to initiate contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. Going into this very skeptically, he actually had a deep, profound experience, which I'm sure he'll share with us, and which inspired his new book, 13 Days with Tezjbar. I don't know if I'm saying it right. I know there's a specific audio way of saying it. To find out more and to download the first part of his book, you can check out marksims.com. It's such a pleasure to have such a being or several beings with us. Let's see, let's go over and get Mark on to the show. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. I'm pleased and honored to be on your program, and I'm new at this. I think this is now my fourth interview that I've done, and the first, I should say the last three were done just within the last couple of weeks. So I'm still getting used to this, but I know you. You and I met a few years back at the Romero Institute through Danny Sheehan and the wonderful people doing amazing work there. And it's so wonderful to finally be on your program because we've been talking about this for a while.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that my first introduction to you was philanthropic work, supporting the work of social justice and basically change making. What is it, from being let's call you a computer nerd, from being a computer nerd or a computer geek to moving into the philanthropic world, how do those two connect?
Well, at first I was a businessman. I was a serial entrepreneur, and I started two companies after working in the IT industry for 5 years. I came out of college with a degree in computer-aided design, so that's my formal training. I worked for Sun Microsystems right out of college and had a wonderful career there in Detroit, Michigan, where I lived, and decided, as a young boy, actually, it was always my dream to start a company. I knew that was a goal of mine. And after 5 years of working at Sun, I launched my first company called Netrex, which was an internet security integration business. We sold computers and internet security related software and services. And that became phenomenally successful because I started that business right when it was a good time to do such a thing. I sold that business in 1999 and retired. I started my second company called Nanorex, which was the brainchild of mine that came from reading a book called Engines of Creation by Dr. Eric K. Drexler. After reading that book in the late 80s while I was working at Sun, I had dreamt of one day working for a company that could create a 3D CAD program for modeling nanosystems, advanced nanomachines or nanobots that have become more part of the popular culture today. But back then, very few people were aware of this term nanosystem or nanomachine or nanobot. And I knew when I read that book that the physics of molecular chemistry would make it possible one day to design and fabricate molecular machine systems with atomic resolution and that these machines would have very important applications that could improve the human condition. Medical applications, applications in power generation and propulsion, all sorts of things. And I thought that software such as the program that we ended up developing called Nano Engineer One would be a key enabler for realizing advanced nanosystems. So that was my second company that was very successful. And then in 2008,
Hold on. Before you go on from that, I thought the very interesting thing that I read about that is that you ended up dissolving that company
I did.
on purpose.
Yeah, on purpose. I didn't sell it. I took all the software and I put it on mothballs, and it's on a server and on backup, with the hope that one day I might bring it out. But I don't think the world is really ready for that technology, because what ended up happening after 5 years of development is I began realizing that I was developing a nanoscale CAD system for designing things that were made from organic material like DNA and amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins.
Yes.
And proteins themselves are building blocks for things like viruses and other things that can be easily designed with our CAD system, and then synthesized in the lab, and that could ultimately be released into the wild without understanding its implication or its consequence.
Right.
And
So you felt you were creating basically a potential weaponized technology.
well, it could have been. Just like any technology can be used for good or bad applications. But what I realized is that what I was creating was a very advanced piece of software that would make it fairly easy for a ambitious college student to design and fabricate a virus. That was my main concern, because as I was developing the software and understanding the anatomy of these very small living creatures, that they would be very easy to design and fabricate with my software. So when I realized that, I shut it down. And in fact, in my book, 13 Days with Tezjbar, which is coming out in just a couple of days, that book talks about the moment that I got a call from the CIA to meet with me. And I was quite disturbed by getting a call from a CIA agent who wanted to meet with me. And after vetting this individual, me and my wife, who was a lawyer, went out to lunch with him and spent a few hours talking with him about the software and our intention with it. And out of that meeting, I realized that I was really dabbling with something that could be potentially very dangerous. And it's funny that we now live in a world in which we have a virus
Right.
that appears, potentially anyway, to have been synthesized in a lab, possibly in China. Who knows the truth to the matter? But I can very easily imagine how that could be done now, because of my background in nanotech and the software we developed.
Right. Right. Yeah. So thanks for sharing that. I did want to clarify that this notion that you came up with this architecture some years ago now. This was what, 20 years ago, 15 years ago?
Well, it was from 2004 until 2008. I shut it down in 2008.
Okay.
So it's 5 years.
Yeah. So okay. So then you went on. What happened after that?
I then took up ballroom dancing. I retired and I became a ballroom dancer. I just fell in love with it. It was something initially that I and my wife did together, because I was retired and she was a lawyer who then retired after I sold my first company, Netrex. That's where I made a lot of my money. And so I did that for 3 years, and I became an amateur champion ballroom dancer. And then it was then during my ballroom dancing years that I discovered Dr. Stephen Greer. And I ended up going to one of his 6-day retreats in Borrego Springs, California, which is about 2 hours northeast of San Diego in the Anza Borrego Desert. And there we spent 6 days, a small group of us, there were 25 of us all together, including Dr. Greer himself, who organized the event. And we meditated in the desert in the evening after the sun went down and practiced what he called the CE5 protocol. And this was a special meditative practice that he claimed could initiate contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, I went to this being very skeptical, but I was intrigued because he had written 3 books, which I had read before I went and registered for this event, and I had watched something that really bent my mind, and that was the Disclosure Project. It was a press conference that he organized in Washington, D.C. in 2001. In the spring of 2001, and I had not seen it until early 2012. And when I saw the 20 witnesses get in front of news cameras to share their personal experiences while they were active in the military, there were 2 people from NASA who were since retired, and then there was one person who was executive within the FAA who shared his account of a major UFO encounter. And after seeing these very impressive people getting in front of cameras and sharing their stories, I realized that if what they were saying was true, that this was the most important story in human history, in my opinion.
Right.
And I wanted to know the truth. So that led to my meeting with Dr. Greer, or I should say my registering for his CE5 retreat.
Right.
At that time, he called CE5 Ambassador Training. And the goal of that was to learn this meditation that he called the CE5 protocol. And it involved a simple mantra that was 3 syllables long that you just repeated over and over, and a visualization technique that you did along with this mantra. We would do it in a circle, 25 of us in the desert, for hours at a time. And then we would take a break and we would have discussions, and then we would continue it for a second session of this meditative practice.
Yeah, and not wanting to go through the spoil the book for everyone, but basically nothing really happened for you, and then you went back on your own without the group, right? And you hadn't.
Well, it was on the 5th night of this 6-day training that a ship appeared above our group, and I saw it materialize out. And I actually have a rendering of it that I'd like to share with your people. This is a rendering, not a photo, of the ship that materialized above our group, and it was only visible for about 3 to 4 seconds at the most. But I saw it come out of thin air, and many of the group saw it as well. Not everyone, because it wasn't directly above us. It was to the east northeast of where we had our circle of chairs, and those people that were facing away from the ship did not see it. It was pitch black, and people were shouting and pointing, but nobody could see where people were pointing. And since the duration was so brief,
Right.
It disappeared very quickly. But it was moving, it was descending, and right before it got to the desert floor, it dematerialized.
Right.
But I was forever changed by this 3 or 4 seconds, because I knew that the burning question that I had gone there to answer, which was, are we alone or not? Are they here? That was answered in spades. I knew the truth at that point.
So there's something that totally piqued you. Maybe you stop the screen share now, because I need to get
Okay. Yeah.
Something, you saw something, and then you went back and you had an experience. You went back alone. This wasn't authorized by the group or whatever, but you went back. Right. And
yeah, so I was very excited. I was excited because I knew we weren't the only planet with life in the universe. And so that just made me happy. And the ship itself was so amazing. The quality of light, it really filled me with an awe. And I knew I was not looking at what Greer was calling a reproduction vehicle. This was truly something from another dimension, is what I believe now. At the time, I didn't know what to think, because it had, you know, materialized out of thin air, and it appeared to me to, you know, not to be decloaked, but to be coming from a higher dimension.
Right. But of
And
course, these things could be explained away, Mark. There are things people say, oh, there's gas clouds and stuff like that. It was only like a small thing, but then you experienced something that could not be explained away.
yeah, so anyway, we were excited. We talked about it. Then about 1 in the morning, we would fold up our chair and our belongings and go back to our hotel, and for the evening. I decided on my own to go back to the place in the desert where we had been practicing our meditation, and I tried doing the CE5 meditation on my own. And that did lead to an amazing experience, in which, when I opened my eyes after doing the meditation for about 15 minutes, I looked up into the sky and I saw what you could only describe as an ocean of green and blue. Uh, and what it looked like is one of these color maps, depicting like a temperature gradient.
Right.
But what came to me was that what I was looking at is where there were brighter areas of green and yellow green, that was areas of the universe that were teeming with life. And the darker areas that were darker blue and bluish green areas, that those areas were less
Right.
filled with life. And that's just
Operation map.
my intuition. And I sat there looking at this for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and nothing was happening. I was waiting for something to occur. So I decided to close my eyes and give thanks to the ETs, who I assumed had given me some kind of vision. I really, at that moment, thought that I had been imbued with some kind of special sight that allowed me to see this colorization of the universe. And and then I closed my eyes, I gave thanks, and when I opened my eyes, the sky was back to normal. So I went back home, or I shouldn't say home, but back to my hotel room, which was about a quarter of a mile to half a mile away from the site. And I got ready for bed. I then laid in bed trying to go to sleep, but I was too amped up from this experience to fall asleep. So I just decided to sit up in my bed and try the meditation alone in my hotel room. So I closed my eyes and I began doing the mantra and the visualization technique. And what began happening was I started seeing this foggy light blue light in my mind's eye. And that began getting brighter, and it was spinning like a whirlpool or a pinwheel very slowly. And after a few minutes, I noticed it began to coalesce, kind of come together into a very bright, well-defined circle or sphere. And when that happened, these rings of light came into it from the outside. And that lasted for maybe 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds. And then that stopped. And then the sphere began changing shape into a humanoid figure. And it just stood there in my mind's eye before me. And I was waiting for it to do something. I was waiting for it to either fade away or to walk away. I didn't really know what to expect, but I assumed that if I had opened my eyes, I wouldn't see it anymore. It was something that I was seeing in my third eye. And after about 4 or 5 minutes of it just standing there looking at me, I decided to open my eyes. And when I opened my eyes, standing at the end of my bed was a light being. what appeared as either a hologram, or if, another person might have thought it was a ghost. If I had not been prepared, I would have thought it was a ghost or a spirit of some kind. And there were parts of it that were transparent, like its chest area and its solar plexus area were clearly transparent. It was scintillating all over. The head, however, was very bright and opaque, but it had eyes that were round with triangular pupils, like an equilateral triangle, somewhat like that.
Mm.
So it wasn't anything like the popular gray with the almond eyes. That wasn't anything like that.
So without wanting to get too much into the description details, because of course, I've realized this from meditation and having realizations, you can describe it till you're blue in the face. Nobody's really going to get the experience you had. Suffice to say, you had a profound experience meditating alone with no drugs or anything. After having been doing this training, you've experienced this being, and then this being does what?
Then this being, I had thought about what might happen. I was trying to summon an ET into my room. So before I began meditating, I thought about it. I said, okay, I'm going to do this meditation. What happens if I'm successful? Now, I didn't think I'd be successful. I really gave it a low probability, but I wanted to try. And the reason I tried it, frankly, was because the sighting was so major. This ship was so big and well defined. I imagined that if what Greer was saying was true, that they had advanced technology and could monitor us, and our feelings, our emotions, and our state of mind. I imagined that they might be monitoring our state of mind and our emotions after this major sighting to see how we would react. And I wanted to show them that I was ready for a face-to-face contact experience and that I wasn't going to be afraid. And I knew from Greer that that was really important, that they wouldn't show themselves if they sensed that you would be scared or frightened in any way. So in fact, my intention originally going back to the location was to try to have a face-to-face contact experience there, but that didn't happen. So when I got back into my hotel room, I thought about it and I came up with a greeting before I started the meditation and there were 3 elements to my greeting that I felt were important. Number 1, I wanted to, of course, say I was grateful that, some advanced civilization would give me the honor of showing himself to me and meeting me face to face. I wanted to be respectful and be grateful.
Right.
So that was the first thing I wanted to say. Number 2, I had heard from Greer and others who were there who had been doing CE5s for years, who claimed to have relationships that were established through their meditation. And they had friendships with ETs from other star systems, they said. And when I saw that ship, I realized they were probably telling the truth. And I would desire a relationship with an extraterrestrial. I felt that would be wonderful and I could learn a lot. And number 3, the final part of the greeting is I wanted to let them know that I completely trusted them unconditionally with myself, with me and my body. I felt they were benevolent. I wasn't afraid. So I said that I left it totally open-ended in the sense for the purpose ultimately of hoping to be taken aboard a craft, which many people have claimed that have been doing CE5s with Greer.
Mm-hmm.
So those were the 3 elements of my greeting. So he's standing there at the end of my bed, and I didn't know how long he would be standing there. So my first goal was really just to burn into my memory what I was looking at.
Mm.
And what I was looking at was a humanoid figure about 6 feet tall. It had a head that was clearly the shape of a human head, except it had a slightly larger top and a sloping lateral head shape, which gave the illusion that it had a crest um, on the top of its head that went back and forth laterally, and that gave the impression that the head was slightly larger than a human head in proportion to its body than a human body. So and then it had these red eye or these
Right.
large round eyes.
So Mark, I want to get more stuck into, like as I said, we can describe and describe, and I'm sure that you'll get illustrations to draw it. And I get that it's really alive for you because you experienced that. But what I really want to get into is what happened with the joining, and then what were
Okay.
the revelations that were revealed to you. That's key, more than the description, which is
Oh.
beautiful for you because you were there. For us, we're just imagining vehicles of light, you know.
Yeah, thank you. I can go into a lot of detail. People often interrupt me because I get into the minutia, which is important. But and I get into that in the book
Yeah,
very well. So the
I don't want
the
to spoil the
key,
book for people, you see.
yeah, and so the key thing that you're referring to is, so I give it this greeting that as it's standing there very still at the end of my bed, and I tell it so I here's the greeting basically. I said, I'm very grateful and honored that you're here.
Mhm.
I hope that this is the beginning of a lifelong friendship, and I trust you to do with me and my body anything that you choose. I completely trust you. So as soon as that greeting was given, and I gave it telepathically
Yes.
because I knew Greer had made it very clear through the week that they could hear our thoughts. So he started walking from the end of my bed and approaching me on the left side. And then he was standing right next to me, and I didn't move a muscle. I didn't want to give him any cause for leaving. And so I just sat there and I looked up into his face, and now he's about 2 feet from me.
Mm.
And I notice as I'm looking into his eyes that his hand is moving. So I look down and he's got his index finger coming directly towards my elbow. And I look down and watch him touch my elbow, and I feel the contact. And it's like a tingly sensation, like static electricity. And I just sit there and watch this. And then after he touches me, he continues to push his finger into my elbow. And he continues to then go through my left side, through my back, through the right side. And as his hand is beginning to go through my right side, his shoulder begins to merge with the left side of my body. And that's when the tingly sensation really jumped. There was this increasing static electricity or pins and needles sensation that wasn't painful at all. It was just a tingly sensation that was very noticeable.
Yes.
But when his shoulder began merging with my shoulder, then it was like, uh-oh, I was surprised because the sensation was suddenly intense. And it began getting much more intense as he was stepping into my body, merging with me. And I had to catch myself because the fight or flight response was kicking in immediately. And I had just told him I completely trusted him and I wanted to honor that. So I forced myself to sit still. And it took everything, all of my willpower to stay still.
Mm.
And as he's stepping into me, I felt like I was going down a big hill of a roller coaster. That G-force and that, intense uh, energy, that adrenaline rush that you feel. That was what was coming through me, and I really am surprised I managed to sit still
Mm.
because I was freaking out. So I sat still. He completely submerged himself in my body, and as I'm writing this out, I begin noticing that the sensation is beginning to fade. And eventually, after another minute or two, it completely dissipates and I feel normal again.
And
But
your eyes are open this whole time.
my what?
Your eyes are open this whole time. You're not in some sort of trance.
Yeah. Oh, I was open. My eyes were open for sure. I was watching him do this. I'm like watching him merge into me and I'm feeling it. And then I'm like, um,
That's an experience in
I was
itself.
definitely awake
So
and
then,
my eyes are open.
so then after this, you proceeded to have conversations with this being inside your head.
That's right.
And now the thing, you know, I mean, I want to get to it because I've read the first part of the book that you released, and I've not read the second part because I've not seen it. But the notion is you had this communication with this being who turns out actually not to be an extraterrestrial.
Well, that's up for debate. I assumed that, you know, all beings that aren't human are extraterrestrials. And what you're getting to is the point that when I asked him, first question is, what's your name? And he said, Tezjbar. I said, where are you from? And he says, I'm from Earth. And I'm like taken back. And I say, how, you don't look like any Earth creature I've ever seen before. And he explained that he was once human, roughly 3,000 years ago, and he lived in an area that is today called Tierra del Fuego, and that I would find it at the southernmost tip of South America. Now, I had never heard of Tierra del Fuego, but it was so clear that that message, telepathic message, right after he had merged with me, that I decided to stop what I was doing. I got my laptop. I had Wi-Fi and internet access. I started Google Earth on my computer, and I typed in Tierra del Fuego into the search field. And when I hit the button, and you know how the Earth will
Yeah,
rotate and zoom in, and eventually, you know, all the, you know, the imagery fills in, and there it was, Tierra del Fuego in lettering. I was stunned. I was gobsmacked, as I say in the book. I was truly blown away, and you could have knocked me over with a feather because I knew then that I was really having a true experience with an ET. But again, that's debatable because he said he was once human.
right.
So my next question is, oh, before I put away the laptop, um, now before he said that, he said I lived in Tierra del Fuego and I was a chieftain of a mighty tribe, is what he said. So I then, you know, did the Google Earth search, and before I put away my computer, I decided to search on his name, Tezjbar, spelled Tezjbar, and he spelled it for me because I was trying to pronounce it, and it took me about a dozen times to get it right. And I could feel through his satisfaction, it was a feeling, not him verbally or telepathically giving me that indication, but it was a feeling that he was satisfied with my pronunciation. And for your listeners or viewers, I'll pronounce it the way he taught me. And it goes like this. Tajbar. Just like that. Tajbar. And it's more guttural. He used my vocal cords and my lips and my mouth to pronounce it. And it was one of a few times that he actually took over my body during these 13 days of communion. And what he told me, in fact, was that we were in a state of communion. In the dictionary has two definitions. The word means the Eucharist in Catholicism, and that's the number one definition. But the other definition that I was unaware of is the intimate joining of feelings and emotions, or sharing of feelings and emotions between two people or two beings in this case. And that's what I experienced for 13 days. I was in this state of communion. And he explained it later that we were the union of the physical body, which was my body, my physical body, my astral body, which is a stage of the soul's development that is immortal. It's the part of us that survives death and that is reincarnated to continue its journey of growth and learning. And the celestial body, he claimed that he was a celestial being from the celestial realm.
Mm.
And I spent 13 days in the state of communion learning all about this process of the individual conscious evolution of the human being, how we get to this state of our consciousness. And he claimed that we come from the animal kingdom, that human consciousness comes through many, many animal lifetimes from the animal kingdom. And there are 4 discrete stages of that where we actually live as thousands and thousands of different species of animals, starting with arthropods. And eventually we graduate to stage 2, which is the stage of reptiles, amphibians, and fish.
Mhm.
Stage 3 is the bird and waterfowl stage, and stage 4 is mammals and marsupials. And so we have been all those animals.
Mm.
And then then we become human after we reach some requirement. And then so I asked him, I said, so you know, if you were once human and now you, and he explained he had, after he had died as a human being back 3,000 years ago, he explained he had ascended to the astral realm. So I said, is that what's going to happen to me when I die?
Mhm.
And he said, no. What typically, not necessarily, that's what he said. He didn't say no. He said, no, not necessarily. What typically happens when a human dies is that they're reincarnated to continue their journey of learning.
Mm.
But if they meet certain criteria at the time of their physical death as a human, they will meet the requirements of ascension. And I asked him, what are those requirements? And he said, at that time, this was within just a few minutes of our communion, this was very early in our conversation. He said, let's leave that for a future discussion.
Mm.
I'll come back to that.
Mm.
So I found out on the 13th and final day that we were in the state of communion what that requirement was. And he told me it was mastering unconditional love.
Mm.
And I asked him, what is unconditional love and how does one master it? And he said to me, that's for you to find out.
Right. The
That was,
old "that's for you to find out" trick, huh? Yeah.
yeah, that's for you to discover on your own. And that was the last conversation I had with him. I went to sleep that night. And when I woke up early in the morning from a lucid dream in which I was with Tezjbar in a dream, I woke up from that dream and he had left me.
Mm. Mm. So what do you really gain from this? Like, how does this apply to the rest of humanity? Your experiences?
Well, boy, that's a big question. And I happen to know a lot about it. I've now had 7 years of communication and friendship and communion with Tezjbar. We've been uh, we've been, you could say, reunited. Um, and I've been a student of his for years now, and I've been given certain knowledge that I'm now sharing with the world through my book. And there's the most important knowledge actually isn't in the book. The book is really a prelude to a sequel in which I'll be sharing the real meat of the knowledge that I was given, and that is the Universal Consciousness Development Chart. It's a chart that has a lot of information in it. So this is a PowerPoint presentation with a slide that is the Universal Consciousness Development Chart. And in this chart, I'll just briefly go through it. Uh, you have 15 dimensions of consciousness. That's the yellow area. The green area on the right are the dimensions of freedom, including the 3 spatial dimensions that are the sub dimensions of or a subset of higher dimensional space that he described to me that have a complement of 9 dimensions. And the physical, and then on the far right, we have 2 dimensions of time, what he described as linear time, which we experience, and imaginary time, which we also experience, but that I'll leave for another time, no pun intended. But if you add up all these dimensions, 15 plus 9 plus 2, in this chart above, I have a table of the individual string theories that make up the body of work we call superstring theory. And there are 2 theories within this superstring theory family that predict 26 dimensions. They don't say what these dimensions are. They just say there are 26 dimensions. And there's all sorts of theories about where these dimensions might be. And you can read all about it on the internet. And there's great information about that. But the question is, where are those 26 dimensions? Well, according to Tezjbar, there are 15 dimensions of consciousness, 9 dimensions of freedom, and 2 dimensions of time, making a complete complement of 26. Now, M theory is the prevailing theory in superstring theory that has now a history of some 60 or 70 years now since it was first discovered. And it predicts 11 dimensions. And these dimensions, I believe, and Tezjbar explained, come from 9 dimensions of time, of freedom, and 2 dimensions of time. And then the other 5 dimensions here described as 1, 2A, 2B, HO, and HE all predict 10 dimensions. And these, I believe, are the 10 dimensions of freedom or of space, the higher dimensional space, of which 3 dimensions of space are a subset, and 1 dimension of linear time. And it's Einstein who coined the term space-time, which is a 4-dimensional object made up of 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of linear time. And that came directly out of the general theory of relativity. But it is, again, a subset. And what this chart attempts to do is to give you some sense of the hierarchy of this higher dimensional space and consciousness of which reality is based. So what you're literally looking at here is a holographic view, a higher dimensional holographic view on which reality is based. Mm. And the rows here you see on the left, we have titles physical, and above that astral, and above that celestial. So in each one of these, we have 5 dimensions of consciousness, and the 5 dimensions of consciousness at the physical layer correlate directly to the 5 physical senses. The next stage, astral stage of consciousness, relate to higher dimensions of consciousness, which we can label as things like astral projection, hive mind. This is referred to in the law of one, the raw material, the law of one, as the social memory complex. This is when a civilization, a very advanced civilization, makes that quantum leap together from a lower state of consciousness to a higher state of consciousness, where all of a sudden their minds are suddenly connected in a network, and you have access to everyone's consciousness.
Mark, how close to that are we?
Well, I think we're in at the threshold of potentially going into the first phase of that. And that is something that the Harmonic Convergence is an attempt to initiate, which is something I've been planning for 5 years.
Tell us about the Harmonic Conversion, because I mean, I can see this chart is very complex and we could go into it in great detail, and just conscious of time.
Right. So let's talk about the Harmonic Convergence. First of all, if people want to learn more about it, go to thc2020.org or .com. They'll all go there. And there's lots of information about what this is and how I've been, and there's now 2 mini documentary shorts that just went live yesterday. The second part did. It's a 2-part mini documentary, both about 8 or 9 minutes long. And I encourage everyone to check it out. They can go to my website, or they can go to, which is marksims.com, and click on THC, the link THC 2020, or you can go to my author's book page, author Mark Sims, and learn more about that. Or you can go to my Facebook, my private Facebook page, and I've been posting that.
Yes.
So I believe that, God willing, that we may experience the first phase of this group consciousness, this social memory complex, as it's referred to in the raw material, for the first time on this planet on July 14th, 2020, which is less than 3 weeks away.
Mm. So what's going to happen there?
Well, it's an experiment. I will leave it to your viewers to go to, to go to my website and watch the mini documents series, the mini documentary 2-part series. That explains it very well. I go into detail, but basically what we're doing beginning on the night of July 4th, we'll be joining Dr. Greer in a global CE5, honoring him and his work. But the next day, the July 5th, we begin a 6-hour program beginning at 11 in the morning Pacific time, in which we will be doing a meditation. And then we start at noon doing 6 hours of live programming. And I'm going to be hosting indigenous elders that have ancient wisdom to share with the viewers. We'll be talking with amazing ET contactees like Craig Campabasso, who was at my house the other day, and we interviewed and had an amazing interview with him. There are other people who are going to be on that program, and we'll be also talking with musical artists, and they will be performing some music that was literally written by Tezjbar, and he asked me to produce it. So I worked with a Hollywood music producer named Bruce Sugar, who does all of the work for Ringo Starr of the Beatles. He's an amazing artist and maestro. I call him the maestro. And he's done in Tezjbar back in 2017 in anticipation of the Harmonic Convergence 2020, in which we're entering right now. He gave me 13 songs that he asked me to re-record. They are all taken from famous songs from from pop culture. Most of them from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, but there are a few that are older, like Amazing Grace was rewritten to activate, in Tezjbar's words, to activate the lyrics for this time. So people listening to the music will be activated and it's a way to raise the vibration, the consciousness of those listening to the music, to become happy and joyful and celebrate this amazing time that we're about to enter.
What I mean, what's the scenario with the COVID thing, and what's really going on with regard? Is this the awakening we're talking about?
Yeah, clearly, clearly this is an unprecedented time in human history. We're at a moment in which the world has never been more connected and more, I should say, smaller. We'll just say smaller. We are exposed to the things happening all over the world, in third world countries, in progressive countries, what we call first world countries, these so-called places. And there's this great pause happening, and we're forced to distance ourselves from each other and to reflect on what's really meaningful in our lives. At least that's, I think, one of the consequences of this great pause. And I think it's all been set up to prepare us for the most important event in human history.
And so are you saying is something specific going to happen on July 14th, or is it like a sort of gradual unfolding?
Well, it's a gradual unfolding. It actually begins tomorrow. So July 1st, so anybody who participated in the original Harmonic Convergence in 1987 will know that there was a major alignment of the planets that coincided with that 2-day event that was organized by Jose Arguelles and his wife, Lloydine is her
Right.
name.
Right.
And the two of them spent their life organizing this event. This is before social media, before cell phones,
Mm-hmm.
and they had millions of people participating in this all over the world at sacred sites like in Cairo or Giza at the Great Pyramids. There's video of people celebrating there, people in South America, Central America, all these major places. It was quite an event. Millions of people participated. Sedona, a good friend of mine, Craig Campabasso, when I interviewed him 2 days ago, he was in Sedona and he arrived at Bell Rock at nighttime. And when the sun rose, there were literally thousands of people surrounding Bell Rock to participate in that event. It was quite remarkable and
Mm.
life-changing for him. And so we hope to have the same kind of effect, only with the benefit of social media, we're taking this to a whole new level. And with the live programming that we're doing over a 10-day period, we're going to educate people on what took place then, the significance of what Jose and his wife Lloydine did, and why that was important, and why that really set up this harmonic convergence, which is the big one. I believe that he paved the way for what's about to happen to take place.
Right.
And so it all begins tomorrow, and what happens tomorrow is very fun, and song that Tezjbar gave me to rewrite, and it's The Age of Aquarius by the Fifth Dimension. Remember that group from the 70s?
No,
No?
no, I was born in the late 70s.
Oh, okay. So you were a baby so if people Google The Fifth Dimension, it's a musical group, and they made a famous song called, among others, called The Age of Aquarius, which was followed immediately by Let the Sunshine In. And this was one of the important songs that Tezjbar asked me to reproduce, and we've done it. And we are going to debut that song tomorrow in honor of what's about to happen. So the first two verses of that song, the first two lines of the first verse, I should say, the first two lines of the first verse is, when the moon is in the seventh house and Jupiter aligns with Mars. That happens tomorrow.
Mm.
So what happens is the moon will enter Libra, the seventh house. And Libra is one of the smallest constellations in all of the constellations. There's only 5 stars that make it up, and it's a box, a very small box with a 5th star outside of the box. So it looks like a box with a little line when you connect the lines together. The moon will come right into the middle of Libra tomorrow.
Right.
And at that time, Mars, depending on where you are on the planet, you will see Jupiter and you will see Mars, and they will all make a straight line.
Right. Wow. So, okay, so there's an astrological convergence, and there's a psychological and spiritual convergence going on. What's the last thing? You know, we're out of time now, Mark. I just wanted to see what's the last thing that you can advise people to do to prepare for this?
Go to THC 2020.org, and there's a register button or join the event button. Click on that, please. Enter your contact information, just an email address, and you'll be put on a mailing list where we will be sending out daily emails about what's happening. So this 10-day event includes a theme for each day. And on that website, it describes each theme for the 10-day period. So that begins again on July 5th, and it ends on July 14th, which happens to be Bastille Day in France, one of the most important days in all of French history and human history, because it was, the day that sovereignty for the citizen was given in a document that was recognized by a nation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mark, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your experience. What would, a lot of people would be worried about sharing. Luckily you're courageous and you are outwardly spoken about this convergence. And thank you for sharing with all of us. And thank you for the work that you do to support the evolution of us all.
It's my pleasure and my honor, and thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'll just close out the show. Thank you, Mark. We'll see you all on the thc2020.org. Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mark.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
What show? So you know, I mean, this is our first sharing of experience where people have shared their joining with other beings of light, and Mark describes it so well in his book. There's more details, and I'm sorry to somebody, Stacy. Yeah, okay. Look, if you want to hear the description that Mark's got, you can get the book, and you know, you can reach out as well, and then you'll get more descriptions of it. What I really wanted to get to is this juice of this harmonic convergence, which is going on starting tomorrow. There's an astrological movement, and Mark is also saying that he's received this download, which is saying that we are in this transition period, and it's without doubt there is something going on astrologically. And you know, and now we've got the internet. This is the first time we've had a real transition period, like a revolution. We've got the Black Lives Matter revolution. It's still going on. Of course, it's still going on. Then we've got the COVID thing, and the whole time we've got the internet. And my first teacher said to me, the internet is here for a reason. It's here for a reason. And this is our life-changing event. You know, this is our World War II. This is our whatever. And now is the transition. So go to thc2020.org and find out and join in with this period. Now we've got a 10-day kind of rev up. We've got a 10-day expansion. And some of the things I really took from Mark, these three elements that enabled him to have this convergence with Tezjbar. And it's being grateful and being honored. Humble gratefulness and honored. And then being open to having a relationship, having a joining with, having a friendship, having a ship together with things, and then trust. And regardless of whether you're, you know, having a collaboration with other beings or just yourself and the universe, those three elements seem to be key in all aspects of living to our greatest. The trust and honoring, the desire for the relationship, for the joining, and then the grateful, honored, and then the trust, being in trust. Okay. So thank you again to my guest, Mark Sims. It's been wonderful. I have a book Evolve, bookevolve.com. Check it out. It's not as exciting as Mark's book. Get Mark's book first, then you can get my book after. Thank you again. We'll see you tomorrow. See you soon. Thank you so much for joining. Please, please share the videos. That's what it's all about, the sharing. Sharing is caring. And thanks for everyone's comments. I do see them. Thank you. And thanks to my guest, Mark Sims. Much love.
Thank you, Mark.